I know I sent your mom some videos that are the official videos, but I feel like they kind of leave some stuff out that maybe a novice sewer wouldn't really understand. So I wanted to kind of fill in the gaps for you. I don't know where you're at in the learning process, so some of this you might already know, but some of it will probably be informative because, heck, some of it I just learned. So, the first thing that they tell you to do is use 100% cotton if you can. There are a few reasons for this. One is that for the hospitals that use autoclave sterilization or really hot water, cotton doesn't melt. Another thing that makes them really good masks is that from side to side and top to bottom, they really have no stretch. The more a fabric stretches, the more it opens up pores in it to allow stuff in, which we don't want with a mask. One thing that it does do, though, is diagonally, it'll have a lot of stretch. It's what they call the bias, if you don't already know that. The bias is the stretchy part, so when they make bias tape, which we'll do later, it is very stretchy. For this particular project, though, they don't care if it's stretchy or not, so you actually can cut strips for your side straps without having to cut on the bias for this particular project. But other times when you're reading your pattern, sometimes it'll tell you to line it up with the bias or line it up with, the regular grain of the fabric. Okay, so in this case, we definitely want to line it up with the regular grain of the fabric, up and down or side to side, so that we don't have that stretch. Another thing that we're going to want to do is they say to wash it and iron it ahead of time. That's because usually cotton will shrink quite a bit the first time. But in this case, because of the dimensions of it and everything, there's no curves or anything like that. Most people I know have not been doing that as a first step, because it's kind of going to shrink the same direction and not really cause a problem. You can still do that if you want to, though, but it's an annoying extra step. Generally, when you are sewing, however, I would say always wash and dry your fabric first so that you know what size you're actually going to have, so you don't end up with like an inch off or something on a waistline. Okay, so I fold my fabric over so that you're always cutting 2 layers. This is kind of what my mom taught me to do. It's really handy because with most pattern pieces you will be doing 2 of them anyway. So you get 2 cut at once, which is handy, but also it is kind of prudent because if you have a pattern piece that, say, you've altered or that maybe you've just kind of fudged it and didn't cut it quite right, at least then you have 2 identical pieces to match together, so that's always handy too. If you get to making a lot of these masks, I would suggest getting one of these, I know it's still in the package, don't judge me, quilters ruler thingies. They're clear, so it helps you see measurements, so you can, you can come over here and say, like, reverse it and, see how much off you are or whatever, which is really, really handy. It's also got diagonals, which are really nice for a lot of things that you might do in the future. Generally, you're going to use one of those with a rotary tool, or by marking it. This is basically like a pizza cutter for fabric, which is awesome. It also allows you to cut, like, somewhere between 6 and 10 pieces of fabric thick at once in the same shape, which is super handy when you're cranking out masks. So definitely something that we've all been using as part of like the mask making teams. I can help you with that if you need help. Otherwise, you're just going to use, your basic run-of-the-mill fabric scissors. I like mine to be flat along the bottom as opposed to household scissors because it allows you to glide along without bunching up the fabric. So you'll probably, well, you won't see me using those because I'm doing this one-handed and I'm just not that cool. So you are going to print off the pattern. I'm going to send the new, most updated one to your mom. It is on page 3, is the official pattern that looks like this. The very first thing that we're going to do is check it against a ruler with this little square down here to make sure that it measures 1 inch. If it doesn't, that means that your printer introduced some margins or shrunk it or expanded it in some way, in which case I can print you off one, or you can just go by the measurements and make your own out of paper, just by this whole 8 3/4 inches by 7.5 inches thing, and then you'll have a piece, but then you'll have to measure everything with a ruler. So it's easier if you just have the right one. So I went ahead and cut that out to make this little square. I usually, with these flat guys, try to line it up with a nice flat edge if I can. In this case, that's going to put me on the fold line though, and we're just going to have one big piece, like when you're cutting a heart out or whatever. So I'll probably move it over a little bit. And what I would do is then take, one of these pencils like I gave you and go along the edge to mark it. Another way you can do it is, to put your ruler down and cut along it so you get a nice straight edge, or use the rotary tool. There are lots of different ways to cut it out. I'll leave that one up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pieces cut out, and then I will move on over to the ironing board where we will start the next step. See you there.